Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kelsey and today we're going to be celebrating my booktube anniversary. So I have been on and off booktube since about 2018, and these past 2 years have been the only years that I have been consistently posting once a week at least. And so I feel like I can finally celebrate my booktube anniversary by giving you my top book of each of the years that I have been on booktube. And obviously I highly recommend these, so these are like perfect recommendations. I started in the spooky season, which was my spookathon TBR. This used to be a readathon that Books and Lala would host, and I really enjoyed her content, so I wanted to join the readathon, and I thought, what a time to start my booktube journey. I also unfortunately am packing this entire room, so I don't have the books on me because I'm turning this room into like my kids' nursery slash like library office. We're just gonna have to work together here, okay? So the first like favorite book I had since joining booktube was in 2018, and that was Night Film by Marisha Pessl. This is a really interesting book that takes place in October, so it's very fitting. That follows the mysterious death of a daughter named Ashley Cordova. Her death is ruled a suicide, but there's this journalist named Scott who suspects otherwise because he's been investigating or sort of like dealing with rumors surrounding the legacy of Ashley's father, Stanislaus Cordova. And he's a man who hasn't really been seen in public for like over 30 years at this point. Scott's really into investigating Cordova in general, just because Cordova's films are very like dark and unsettling, and they're like cult classics. So there's a lot of this like dark, mysterious atmosphere going into the book when you start it. This is probably one of the first times I remember being completely engaged with a book for like over 600 pages. It had twists and turns that I really wasn't expecting, and I really found Scott McGrath, the journalist, to be a fascinating and engaging protagonist to follow. At the time, I remember not being able to like express how interesting I found this book and how engaging I found this book and how I really just couldn't put it down. But still to this day, like 6 years later, I think about Night Film all the time. I remember thinking to myself, like while I was reading it, that I would forget that this was a fake book, that this was a fake journalist and a fake mystery. And you're gonna see that that's a little theme in these like favorite books. But truly, I haven't stopped thinking about this book in years, so I still obviously highly recommend it. I feel like I should probably do a reread soon. 2019 was the year that I fell in love with Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Anybody who knows me in real life, this is the book I often give the most recommendation to. I would consider it probably one of my favorite books of all time. It's definitely one of the books I've reread the most. Daisy and the Six follows two sort of journeys to LA in order to make it in the music business. Daisy is a girl who's sort of coming to age in Los Angeles, and she's hanging out at a lot of these like rock show places, and her voice is starting to get noticed. And this is when she comes into contact with this band called The Six, led by a brooding Billy Dunn, and they head to Los Angeles in order to obviously make it big in the music industry. And a producer realizes that they will make a whole lot more of a success if they work together and create an album with one another. But obviously, given that Billy is dealing with living in LA, coming to LA for the first time, alcoholism, becoming a father, Daisy is also dealing with alcoholism, drug use. It's a melange of a lot of problems told through the story of a reporter who's sort of cataloging this era of Billy Dunn's career. Firstly, I have always really enjoyed the characters in this book. I am a big fan of 60s rock and roll, 70s rock and roll, that sort of era of time. And I enjoyed the like rock star attitude that a lot of these characters had. Particularly though, I really enjoy the female characters of the book. So Karen, Daisy, and Camilla. They feel so beautiful. They feel so smart. They feel so women confident in themselves, but each of them represent an aspect of femininity and womanhood that I've always really appreciated upon every reread of this book. Reid did such a fantastic job of making me feel like I was reading an expose on Daisy Jones and the Six. I felt like I was following this band as they grew, and I found myself like really wanting to listen to the music. Since then the albums come out, I obviously bought it. I was so entranced in this world, but of course, like with Night Film, they don't exist. Taylor Jenkins Reid, I just found, did a really excellent job at making these characters and the atmosphere of the book come alive and feel like these are real people and I'm really reading an expose on this band. The ability to do such a great character work in making me believe that this was real, I think was really talented and amazing, and I was very impressed, still impressed. Of course, the plot contained everything I loved: lovers who cannot be together, the music scene in the 70s, women taking charge of their lives in a time where they don't really have that option. I was hooked from the beginning, and I obviously still haven't stopped thinking about this book because I do still consider it to be one of my favorites, and I do try to reread it when I can. I still cry at the end of the book, so this book just means so much to me. I absolutely love it. In 2020, I discovered one of my favorite authors with Bunny by Mona Awad. This book changed something in me. It follows a young woman named Samantha who is working on her writings master's at a prestigious New England university. She's a scholarship student who sort of sticks to herself and is placed in a creative writing cohort with what appears to be clique of rich girls who call each other Bunny, and they seem to move and speak as one, and she's very turned off by them at first. However, everything changes when Samantha is asked to join the Bunnies at one of their soirees, and soon everything in Samantha's life is sort of brought to a collision. Man, what a book. I remember thinking that I didn't really have a lot to say about this book just because I thought everything was absolutely perfect. It was probably one of my first examples of a really, really weird reading experience. I think definitely at the time I hadn't read anything that weird that was that engaging and that well written. Samantha is probably one of the most interesting characters I've read from in a really long time. I still think about her to this day. I really feel like this is the perfect melange of The Craft, a little bit of Mean Girls, and it involves one of my favorite tropes additions in books. I love anything to do with cults or a sort of hive mind thinking. I think that is probably one of the most interesting plot points that can be added to a novel, just looking at someone psychologically, how they fall into these cults. The writing, to this day, Mona Awad will never disappoint me. I love her writing. I love her writing style. It feels very stream of conscious. It really feels like you're within the character's head, but specifically their mind, and their mind as they are succumbing to the whims of whatever Mona Awad is writing. Bunny is just one example of her books that I absolutely adore, and I would highly recommend Bunny, but I definitely see it as a love it or hate it type of book. You're either really gonna fall into the love of the weirdness and the psychological fall of the character, or you're not. In 2021, I read another example of these rock and roll books that I absolutely love, and that was the final revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton, another book that takes place in the electric music defining age of the 1970s, and once again follows an iconic rock and roll duo and their sort of sensational breakup. Opal is this young independent woman who is breaking the Afro-punk scene, and she definitely doesn't doubt that she can become a star, and this is sort of solidified when this British rock sensation named Neville Charles discovers her at this amateur bar night, and they make rock music together in New York City. But obviously in a time where things are a lot harsher for vibrant and spunky women, especially Black women, Neville and Opal sort of meet at an odds in really disastrous ways. So I think coming off of Daisy Jones and the Six, it's no secret that I was really going to adore this book. Primarily, this follows an oral history type of narrative, much like Daisy Jones and the Six. And I find that it really works in these non-fiction, fictional narratives. In my opinion, Walton's writing really added to the novel because much like Taylor Jenkins Reid, it felt like these characters were going to jump out of the page, they were real people. And their personalities and the decisions that they were making were really matching the personalities and decisions that were probably being made by rock stars at the time of the 1970s in New York City when these punk scenes were sort of coming at the rise. And because of this, I felt myself really wanting to Google the characters, and that's something I did with Daisy Jones and the Six as well. Something I actually think that this book does better than Daisy Jones and the Six is how intersectional it is. The novel does discuss sexism in the industry as well as drug addiction, but it also ties in themes of racism in this industry, classicism, that I do actually think was lacking from Daisy Jones and the Six. Additionally, I think the romance between the narrators, so the person writing the biography, the article of the band. I definitely meant to say relationship and not romance. Sorry. The relationship between this narrator and the band and the rock duo was a bit more interesting, and I really enjoyed that it was revealed at the beginning of the novel, which I felt added a nice sense of tension within the rock duo and the interviewer. All in all, I really believe that this is a fantastic novel. I still think about it to this day, much like with the other books. And I think if you really like oral format, or you really like Daisy Jones and the Six, and you really like 60s, 70s rock music, you're going to enjoy this book. So I highly recommend it. I still think about it I think it's a great book. Then in 2022, we can finally bring up one of my favorite authors. I was struggling of what book to add from hers in this list, but I had to go with Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is about an orphan boy named Robin Swift who is brought to London by this mysterious professor in order for him to sort of train in like languages, so like Latin, ancient Greek, Mandarin, all in preparation so that he can study at the Oxford's like Institute for Translation, which is known as Babel, the Tower of Babel, obviously. And the tower and these students are sort of learning and working together in order to solidify the like world's magic system, which is using these like silver bars that have these translated words on them, which gives the British Empire like unparalleled power. And Robin sort of finds himself between Babel and the yearning for knowledge, and then his sort of upbringing in a poor Chinese village that he was taken away from. Another book that I still think about to this day, every time someone I know reads it, I'm always like, I need to talk to you about it. Every single page of this book is well intended. There is no word that is in this book that R.F. Kuang did not intend to write. Even the footnotes add to the like eloquence of the novel, but also made it feel serious and as though you are reading an academic text, as though this is real, which is obviously a major theme for the books that I love. But this book also discusses, I think in really interesting ways, obviously racism and classism and colonialism and how the British Empire has taken over the world, despite the fact that this is a like sort of rewritten history with a magic system. The importance of colonialism and how it affects the people that it uses is a theme that is rampant throughout this book. R.F. Kuang is undoubtedly one of the best writers of our generation. I was worried after finishing the Poppy War trilogy that I wasn't going to enjoy anything from R.F. Kuang, and like obviously I was wrong, because Babel really stepped up the game for me and it just showed the breadth and talent that R.F. Kuang has to take on such a lengthy fantasy novel with intense and emotional themes. I can't more like highly recommend this book. I think if you want to read even one book from R.F. Kuang, it has to be Babel. And because of this and the Poppy War trilogy, R.F. Kuang has become one of my favorite authors, autobi authors. I will read anything that woman writes. And then finally, my favorite book of last year, 2023, was And Then She Fell by Alicia Elliott. This was a fantastic and really interesting novel that looked at motherhood and mental health. It follows Alice, who just gave birth to her baby girl Dawn, with her charming husband Steve, who is this white academic that studies conveniently Mohawk culture and is nothing but supportive as he moves him, Alice, and their daughter into the Toronto suburbs. But things start to go awry as Alice is left at home while Steve is working. She really feels like an imposter in this neighborhood. She can't connect with her daughter, and every day is spent feeling as though she is being watched by her neighbors as the only Indigenous resident in the neighborhood. Oh, I cannot express how much I really still to this day love this horror book. I read this at the time that Barbie was coming out, so a lot of the like visuals I have of this novel is very like Barbie reminiscent of like just the importance of motherhood, particularly the ending of the film, which made me sob when I was reading this. I find while the horror is really excellent in this book, kudos to Alicia Elliott for making like a very fantastic spooky story, but the book is so much more than that, and using mother's mental health and postpartum issues is what actually frightens readers. It ties also these themes with other issues of wrongful imprisonment, mistreatment, and genocide of Indigenous peoples in Canada, drug addiction, feminism, like so much more. Throughout the story of Alice in this book, there is a side story of this tale of the sky woman that is weaved throughout, and both of these stories are sort of coinciding with each other about creation and womanhood, and they brilliantly tie together in a way that I thought was so impressive and so fantastic. Elliott's writing is so unbelievably like smart and quick, and I never wanted to put this book down. I read it really, really quickly, and when I had to put it down, I was always thinking of picking it back up again. I really, really wanted to reread it, just talking about it with you guys again. This was a fantastic read. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed a little glimpse into my favorite books of the past 6 years. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books. Did you like them? Did you hate them? What did you think about them? Let me know down below. And if you would like to follow me on my reading journey and know not only my favorite books, but my least favorite books, I always leave a link down below to my Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram if you would like to follow me there. And of course, because it is the end of the video, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. It does wonders for my channel, makes me feel really good. And that's it. I never know how to end these things, so I will see you next time. Okay, bye!